Okay, this is the final review sheet for the U.S. History Final for History 3. I'm going to start on the last column and move towards the second column. I'm starting at the bottom and going up. Um, Sometimes it works well to go backwards on these things because I'll try to do the first column in class as much as we can on Monday. So let's start with Al Qaeda. And I'll highlight each term as I talk about it. I'll try to stay on that um, way of doing things so it's not too confusing. Um, so Al Qaeda was the group responsible for the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. Al Qaeda was the group responsible for the terrorist attacks on the United States in September 11, 2001. The 2000 election. There are two questions over the 2000 election. One deals with who decided the outcome of the 2000 presidential election, and the answer to that is the Supreme Court. You would have saw a question very similar to that um, on the other test we just took. And then the other question is what states' voting requirements were key? And the answer to that is Florida. So the first thing you need to know about the 2000 election is that it was decided by the Supreme Court. The second thing you need to know about the question was where were the state's voting results key? And the answer to that is Florida. Clinton healthcare. So there could be, when we talk about Clinton, we talk about things he accomplished or didn't accomplish. Um, so Clinton failed to bring about a change in healthcare. Clinton failed to bring about a change in healthcare. FMLA. FMLA is the law that guaranteed full-time employees 12 weeks of unpaid leave a year. The law that guaranteed full-time employees 12 weeks of unpaid leave per year. The Taliban. So some people get the Taliban and Al Qaeda mixed up. They are not the same, just so you know. It was a group removed from power as a result of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. The Taliban, a group that was removed from power as a result of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. Drug trafficking in Latin America. What you need to know about this is that the Bush administration cracked down on drug trafficking in Latin America. You should know the Bush administration cracked down on drug trafficking from Latin America. Invasion of Kuwait. Let me find that question here. In 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait to take over the nation's richest oil deposit. In 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait to take over the oil deposits there. Reaganomics. Reaganomics focused on tax cuts. Reaganomics focused on tax cuts. Engel versus Vitale. Engel versus Vitale is the court case that restricted religious teaching in schools. The court case that restricted religious teaching in schools. Liberals. Remember all those questions about liberals and conservatives on the Modern America test? Well, this is just one of those questions. So, liberals. I can find the question, that is. Supported laws protecting rights of minorities and women. Liberals supported laws protecting rights of minorities and women. Iran hostage crisis. Iran hostage crisis. It it let's see, how should I say this? It basically conflicts in the Middle East became a major foreign policy challenge. Conflicts in the Middle East became a major foreign policy challenge. Camp David Accords was Carter's greatest foreign policy achievement. Camp David Accords, Carter's greatest foreign policy achievement. The result of Nixon's resignation. The result of Nixon's resignation was that Americans had less confidence in their government officials. The result of Nixon's resignations, Americans lost trust in government officials. United States versus Nixon. This one could be a little confusing, so just be aware. The Supreme Court ruled in Nixon, U.S. versus Nixon, that he had to turn over tapes containing Oval Office conversations. So U.S. versus Nixon. Supreme Court ruled that Nixon had to turn over tapes containing Oval Office conversations. Rights of the disabled. American government expanded the rights of the disabled in 1970 by passing laws guaranteeing access to education. Rights of the disabled were expanded by the U.S. government in the 1970s by laws guaranteeing them access to education. Chicano movement. Increase Latinos' awareness of their history and culture. Chicano movement. Increase Latinos' awareness of their history and culture. AIM movement. Okay, this is kind of a different question. I don't remember. This would have it wouldn't have been on your Modern America quiz, so you've never seen this question before. Confronted the government through a march from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. AIM movement. Confronted the government through a march from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. Occupation of Alcatraz. So this is related to what we were just talking about. Occupation of Alcatraz. Primary purpose was to draw attention to broken treaties. Primary purpose was to draw attention to broken treaties. End of the counterculture. This is also from layered curriculum, so you haven't seen this one before either. And it is the deaths of Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix led to people began to realize that drugs were deadly. End of the counterculture. Deaths of Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix made people realize that drugs were deadly. Counterculture. This question revolves around the characteristics of the counterculture. And there is 2 questions on this, I believe. So you should know that one of the defining characteristics that provided a foundation for those that followed it is protest. So, the defining characteristics of the counterculture that provided a foundation for the rights afterwards is protest. So if there was an option like drugs, the characteristic of the counterculture, drugs, does not encourage other rights movements to take place. Okay, And did I say there was another one? No, maybe not. Doesn't look like that's one. Okay, so second wave of feminism. This is also from layered curriculum. Second wave of feminism differed from the first wave because modern women wanted full equality with men, not just the right to vote. Second waves of feminism differed from the first wave because modern women wanted full equality with men, not just the right to vote. Nixon trip to China. Nixon's trip to China. President Nixon visited China to improve trade relations. President Nixon visited China to improve trade relations. Vietnamization. This word was on our vocab list, and a lot of people did it, so it kind of talked about it a lot. Emphasize the United States must empower the South Vietnamese to assume more combat duties. It emphasized the United States must empower the South Vietnamese to assume more combat duties. Sometimes they were called the ARVN, which is South Vietnam troops. Pentagon Papers. Pentagon Papers revealed American leaders misled Congress and American people about the war. Pentagon Papers revealed American leaders misled Congress and the American people about the war. Malawi Massacre. American soldiers killed hundreds of Vietnamese civilians. Malawi Massacre. American soldiers killed hundreds of Vietnamese civilians. Nixon's attack on Cambodia. Nixon's attack on Cambodia, he tried to break the stalemate in the peace process by ordering a ground attack of Viet Cong bases in Cambodia. He tried to break the stalemate in the peace process by ordering a ground attack on Viet Cong bases in Cambodia. That one you need to write the whole thing because it's a confusing question. I'm just going to tell you that. 1968 presidential election. Who won the 1968 presidential election? Richard Nixon. It's pretty straightforward. Nixon won the election. Selective service system. This is also from a layered curriculum unit. To eliminate deferment abuses, selective service adopted a lottery. To eliminate deferment abuses, or preference to the people the selective service adopted a lottery. African Americans in Vietnam. African Americans in Vietnam. Let's see here, number 12. Okay. They were more likely to serve in combat positions. African Americans in Vietnam were more likely to serve in combat positions. Now you should have this last column completed now, number 94 through 66. Please make sure you're writing down everything I'm saying because some of that are different parts of the question and some questions can be confusing. Studying is very important.